This morning's reading comes from our Tapestry of Faith curriculum for UU children, but as you will hear, this is really not appropriate for children, so I'm going to tell it to us. Our Universalist miracle, written by Charlene Brotman and Barbara Marshman. As a boy growing up in England, John Murray dreaded Sundays. His family, led by a stern father, rose at dawn each Sunday to spend a whole day praying and attending church. Can you imagine? More than just 1 hour, a whole day. After church, John's father would quiz him on the sermon. And if John couldn't answer every question correctly, his father would strike him with a cane or box his ears. Sunday was a time to sit and think about hell, a place where most people went after they died and burned in flames forever and ever. Children's story. John's parents believed in the Calvinist idea of God, that God decided whether a person would go to heaven or hell before that person was even born, and a person could do very little to change this. Furthermore, only a certain few people were chosen to go to heaven. People thought that if you attended church all the time, if you worked very hard and you were very good, you made a good living, well, that could mean that maybe God had chosen you for heaven. And this is why John's father was so strict. John tried to please him. At the age of 6, he could read entire chapters of the Bible. He developed a talent for speaking, and as a teenager, he was often asked to preach in nearby churches. When John was 19, he left for London and took a job at a cloth mill. But he was careful to attend church every evening and on Sunday, and he woke each morning at 4:00 a.m. to pray. He began to think that maybe he would be one of the special people chosen by God to be saved after all. He started to feel and act superior to others who were not as pious as he. And then one day in church, John met a woman named Eliza, the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. He immediately fell in love with her, and she with him. Soon after, John and Eliza were married. Now, at this same time in London, a small group of people called Universalists were preaching ideas about God that were so very different from the Calvinists. John, said Eliza one day, "Who are these Universalists?" "I don't know," he answered. "I hear they are evil and dangerous people." "What do they believe, though?" asked Eliza. "Well, from what I hear, they believe some crazy idea that, each person will go to heaven because God is so good." "To tell you the truth, John," said Eliza, "I sometimes wonder myself why a truly good God would want millions of people to go to hell through no fault of their own. And besides, John, is anyone completely good, really?" John felt uneasy. It seemed wrong to question what he had been taught all of his life. "Let's just find out more," said Eliza. John and Eliza did learn about Universalist ideas. They spent several years carefully thinking through their beliefs, and I'll get to this point a little bit later. And in the end, they chose Universalism. Their friends were shocked and refused to be friends with them anymore. John and Eliza didn't care. Universalism gave them hope in place of stern judgment. John discovered that he no longer looked down on other people. He now cared deeply about each person, rich and poor. He and Eliza made new friends, and to add to their happiness, they had a baby boy. And suddenly, everything changed. Their baby died, and Eliza became very sick. John spent all their money and borrowed even more to save her, but she also died. John was then thrown into debtor's prison for owing money. One day, Eliza's brother came to John in prison and said, "I have come to pay your debts and to get you out of this place." John replied, "My wife, my baby are dead. I don't care whether I live or die. Just leave me here." But Eliza's brother brought John home anyway. "Come on, John," said his friends. "Preach universalism for us. We need you." "I shall never preach again," John said, "but I know what I will do. I'm going to cross the ocean to America and just lose myself in the wilderness. I am done with this part of the world." So in 1770, John sailed to America in the ship, the Hand in Hand. The ship was supposed to dock in New York City, but the captain miscalculated, and instead, the Hand in Hand got stuck on a sandbar off the coast of New Jersey. The captain asked John to go ashore to find fresh food and water for the crew. John was glad to get off the ship, and after walking some distance through the tall New Jersey pines, he came to a clearing with a large house, and to his astonishment, a trim-looking church made of rough-sawed lumber. A tall farmer stood in the front of the house cleaning fish. "Welcome," called out the farmer. "My name is Thomas Potter." "And I am John Murray from the ship Hand in Hand." "Yes," said Thomas, "I saw your ship in the bay, stuck on that sandbar she is." "May I buy your fish to take back to the ship's crew?" asked John. "Well, you can have them for the taking, and gladly," answered Thomas. "And please come back and spend the night with my wife and me. I will tell you all about this little church here and why it is here." John gratefully carried the fish to the sailors and then returned to Thomas's home for the night. "Come, my friend, sit in front of our fire this chilly fall evening," said Thomas. "I'm so glad for you to be here. You may be the very person I've been waiting for." John wondered, waiting for? I mean, what could this guy be talking about? Thomas explained, "You see, I grew up here in these woods. I never had the chance to read or write, but I always liked hearing the Bible read. And I've thought a lot about religion. Trouble is, my ideas are so different from the ideas of all the other preachers who travel around these parts. I built this little church for myself and all the traveling preachers to use. I ask them questions and I talk to them, but they don't know what to make of me and my ideas. I keep looking for a preacher of a very different stamp. I want a preacher who will teach about a loving God who saves all people, not just a chosen few. Today, when I saw your ship in the bay, a voice inside me seemed to say, 'There, Potter, and that ship may be the preacher you have been so long expecting.'" John said quickly, "I'm not a preacher." But Thomas Potter, leaning forward, said, "Can you say that you have never preached?" "Well, I have preached," answered John slowly. I believe, as you do, also in a loving God." "I knew it," shouted Thomas. "You are the preacher for whom I have waited for so long. You have got to preach in my church on Sunday." "No," replied John firmly, "I never want to preach again. Tomorrow, as soon as the wind changes, I will be on my way." But after John went to bed, he could not sleep. He thought to himself as he tossed and turned, "I just wanted to get away from everything. If I preach universalism, I know there will be trouble. Folks here in America mostly have Calvinist views, just like in England. Why start trouble for myself in a new country? But this man, Thomas Potter, he has such faith in me. He's so kind. I wish I knew what to do." Well, by Saturday, the wind still had not changed, and so John finally agreed to preach the next morning. Thomas Potter was overjoyed. He grabbed his coat and hat and ran for the door. "I'm going to spread the word to all the neighbors. They can expect a sermon such as they have never heard before." And so on Sunday morning, September 30th, 1770, Thomas Potter's dream came true, and the first Universalist sermon was delivered in America. At last, he could hear a preacher who talked of love instead of punishment. As for John Murray, after that Sunday, he knew he wanted to preach again. Just as he expected, there were people who were angry at him for preaching ideas so different from Calvinism. They spread lies about him and even stoned him at one point. But he stuck to his beliefs, and in 1779, he organized the first Universalist church in America, in Gloucester, Mass. After many years, he fell in love again and married. He and his wife, Judith, had a daughter, and in fact, Judith is the only reason we know this story today, because she was a great writer in her own right. And if you ever find yourself in Lanoka Harbor, New Jersey, the little church that waited so long is waiting for you, too, to visit.